So, when they play Liverpool away or something like that, it's worth looking elsewhere. But again, these players will end up being the highest point scorers in the season. The likes of Salah, Kane at the moment, De Bruyne will probably be in the top 5 point scorers. So that throughout the season, if you've got them and you're captaining them, there's only how wrong you can go. So yeah, just trying to stick to a few tried and tested players, but rotating between them based on fixture.
That's absolutely fantastic knowledge there. And that's why we got you on this show, because we knew you were the sort of studious, intelligent guy that would have done that maths, because we were all around Peller's laptop and he had Excel out and we just didn't know how to work it out. Yeah. So I'm glad you're here and told us that. Captain, I'm sorry. Back to you, mate.
That's all right, mate. The other question was going on the back of what we just talked about is who are you going to captain this week? You've probably just said it, but there you go.
Well, I haven't, because actually I think this week is really hard. I think it comes down to Liverpool or Spurs. Man City have a good fixture against West Ham, but their form is not good enough at the moment for me to be putting the armband on them. And it doesn't help that I actually don't own any of them at the moment. But the form of someone like Salah, Kane and Son, I think it's hard to look past these three. Picking between them is really tough. Son and Kane, even picking between the pair of them, is very difficult. Kane seems to be the consistent one, always creating. And I think with Bale in the team, his creativity is going to go to both of them and then not just be targeted at Son quite as much. So at the moment, it's on Kane, but it'll probably be Kane or Salah. At the moment, I'd say Kane.
What's the Monday night game?
Kane.
It's going to be Kane. I was looking at your. I was actually looking at your Twitter poll earlier. I think you'd had sort of 500 odd people on it, and it looks like 60% are going Liverpool.
Yeah, so I put that out. I try to put one out every week because it's always quite interesting when you get a lot of respondents. And I'm very surprised how many people have come back with Liverpool over Spurs. It's as we'd expect, it's those two that dominate it, only 10% voting anything else. But 70% going on Liverpool and presumably on Salah is much more than I expected with the form that Kane and Son are in.
Yeah, it's probably from past experience, being a Spurs fan myself and how usually inconsistent they are. And I think maybe that's in the back of some people's minds.
You are due a defeat as well, aren't you? You won one and you drew one, so you're due a defeat.
Exactly.
Good old Burnley. Carry on.
I think the last question from me is, when do you think is the best time to use your wild card?
So again, to start off, I mean, it's very dependent on your situation. If you can hold it longer, then great. If you could hold it to sort of game week 15, 16, then great. But again, part of this is the squad value. I've held it late for the past 2 seasons. And you can, from my rank, it's not something that's gone badly, but I've played it early because of the state my team was in a little bit. My defense was in pieces. And I knew that over the coming weeks that I would have to play sort of -4s here, -4s there. So if I played it now, that I would not have to take them going through the next weeks, because I knew that next 3 or 4 weeks, I'd just be wanting to hold rank and I wouldn't be wanting to make gains. So it's very dependent on the case. I think generally as a rule of thumb, overall, a game week sort of 5, 6 wild card, maybe 7, 8 is, if you're not sure when to play it, that generally works out for a lot of people, because you can hit the players that are in form, are sort of the good value players. But if you've already got them in your team, then don't play it for the sake of it. The later you can play it, the better.
Right, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, unless you're like me that basically kept my wild card until basically the last few hours before. I think it was like, I can't remember if it's Boxing Day or something like that. And I woke up with a hangover thinking that I should use my wild card rather than not use it. And I had a pretty decent team as well. And I kind of made those drastic wrong choices and kind of didn't really was able to crawl myself back up the league from that day onwards. So
I was going to say, Captain, our listeners all know about your hangover. They must have heard about this hangover 10 times.
Legendary.
I think what you've got to think about with that wild card, right, is you know if your team's in a bad situation. So as you're saying there, if you're coming below the average, say 3 weeks in a row and you're below average, there's probably an issue there. But if you're hitting around the average or you're above it, probably keep it. Right?
And I agree. There's no such thing as a lot of drunk transfers can come out well. I think some of my best transfers were made at a Christmas Eve party about 2 years ago when Ole took over at United. I brought in Rashford and Pogba for a -8, I think it was, on Christmas Eve at about 10 o'clock at night. Turned out to be the best transfers I think I've ever made when they went on that absolutely great run of form. So, sometimes actually when you don't think about it quite as much as you maybe would, it can pay off a little bit.
Before the wheels fell off, eh?
Exactly.
So that's it for me. NVD, you got a few questions, I do believe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, just onto the chips now. Again, these can sometimes make or break your season and have some impact on your mini leagues as well. But, when we talk about things like your bench boost, your triple captain, your free hits, when do you typically look to activate them?
I mean, 9 times out of 10, they get played on a double game week. So triple captain and bench boost for me, I would be very surprised if I ever played it not on a double game week. Your bench boost, especially, even if you've got players, 4.5 mids who you're using on your bench boost, having them over 2 games, the chance of getting a return increases by so much. So especially with your triple captain as well, you often, those big players like Salah, like De Bruyne that we spoke about, they can have one off game week. It can happen. But the chance that they blank twice, especially if they've got 2 easy fixtures, it's very rare. So I just think, on the double game week, there'll be enough of them that you can play all your chips on a double game week. So it is worth waiting for it. I think the only one that's an exception is the free hit, which you can then play sometimes on a blank game week to try and, so you don't have to think about just the teams that aren't playing. But I rarely, apart from a double or a blank game week, I don't think there's much reason. I know there's great stories where, people have triple captained someone on a single game week and got so much. But if you took the average that people get playing their chips on a single versus double game week, I reckon, I mean, I haven't done this maths. I've done some maths, but not this. I reckon it comes out in favour that you're better off playing it in the double game week than in a single.
Yeah. I reckon you're right. Yeah. You've got to really fluke it, haven't you? You've got to really be lucky,
it is,
or just get it right. Guys, I almost fell off my chair because Man United have just gone and scored against PSG. Marcus Rashford called him out yesterday.
As well.
He's in form.
Full time. United have beaten PSG, eh? You heard it here first.
Awesome.
How are Chelsea doing, Harry?
0-0 and 0-0. Full time at 0-0, and we seem to have saved both 2 of our transfers for the 92nd minute for some reason. Don't get me started, but
great stuff. Well, probably both teams will be ending up playing in the Europa League, so we'll move on. So, I mean, you've spoken about this weekend and some of your premium players. Obviously, you mentioned Kane potentially for the armband. Any key differential that you've kind of got in your team, or even thinking about transfer-wise for the up-and-coming weekend?
A big one that I like, actually, that I've spoken a little bit about, a couple of them, one more premium, one less so. Pulisic I do really like, partly as a Chelsea fan, but partly as what the numbers are saying. We know what he could do last season. And as the cheapest Chelsea asset, apart from Ziyech, he does look like a really good option. He's always getting forward, and the way Werner plays sort of striker to left wing will mean that Pulisic plays left wing and through the centre quite a lot of the time because Werner just wide. So I think the 2 of them actually complement each other really well. Hopefully, when they're all fit in the next coming weeks, I can get some points. He was in on my wild card, didn't do me anything this week, but he looked quite good and a player I'm excited about.
He's a great player. I was going to say, I've had him for 5 weeks, mate. He's done nothing for the first 3 weeks. He's got me 3 points now. What do you think about Mason Mount? As a Chelsea fan, I'm really interested to hear what you think, firstly, about Mason Mount and secondly, about Werner.
Mason Mount, I love as a player. I think his work rate is second to none, which I think is why he'll play in the Champions League a lot, because he works so hard. He works harder than anyone else on our team. He's always running, always pressing, which is just great. I do struggle to see how he gets in our team when Ziyech, Pulisic, Havertz, Werner are all fit. And we're going to be playing 2 CDMs most likely. So I don't quite know where he fits, but He'll still get minutes, whether it's off the bench, whether it's the occasional start when someone needs a rest. He'll be in and out of the team. He's not an FPL asset at the moment, not someone that I'd be picking just because the points aren't there. He's often in and around and always involved, but it's never always in the final third. So I think there's better options. Werner, I think probably like I'm sure some of you had, game week 1 was in my team. I then took him out a few weeks ago. He looks great. I still think that the price is a little bit much for him at 9.5. We have good fixtures, so he's one of the players that you probably think about when their fixtures are good and you won't when their fixtures are bad. Just comparing him to someone like Son, I just don't see how Werner could be picked in your team at the moment over Son looking at their form. I know Werner did well at the weekend, but it would have to be an additional on a lot of these assets. So he's a great option, but he's a bit of a premium and a bit of a nice to have at the moment rather than me thinking that he's essential just off one game week.
Yeah, that makes me feel better that I got him out of my team when I used my Wildie then. And yeah, definitely got Son and Kane. So yeah, hopefully they continue returning. Look, I mean, you've given us a myriad of great tips, but I mean, if there was one tip that you feel really kind of makes a difference for a lot of FPL managers and especially those playing, this being their first season, what do you reckon it'd be?
I think it's especially key this season is to be patient. This season, one game week to the next are complete polar opposites. It's very easy to chase points in this game, especially the way it's gone. You have suddenly the amount of players who are scoring sort of 10 plus points each game week seems so much more than average. So you could easily chase someone and then for the next 2 game weeks, they blank. And I think a key way of putting this was something from, I don't know if you know Adam Hopcroft on Twitter. What he says is whenever there's an opportunity, if you don't get on it, there will always be another one. So if you think that a player looks great this week and you don't bring him in, the people who do bring that player in this week, whether he does well or not, are unlikely to get on a player that looks hot for next week that you can then get on if you don't make that transfer. So you don't need to chase everyone. I think patience is really key, especially the way this is looking this season, especially some of the players that are good assets. Someone like Jimenez and Ings, people are chopping and changing between them the whole time, but we know that they will score goals eventually and they will score, 10, 15 goals this season. So yeah, patience is a real one for me. Just try and stick it out, maybe slightly longer than I think. If someone blanks on a Saturday morning, it's very easy to reactionary take them out by lunchtime, which I'm sure I've done it plenty of times already this season.
Definitely.
But yeah.
I love to hear this, guys.
Great tip.
I love to hear this about patience, listening to 2 people that have just both told me they removed Werner on their wild cards and had no patience with the man.
I had 4 weeks of patience and that was more than enough for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's my justification. But I mean, that's a great tip, to be honest. There's so many of us knee-jerk FPL managers that, I think, hearing that, and I think it's a common theme that we hear from a lot of the kind of the experts is that patience. So that's great to hear that. And really kind of a final one for me is, you've spoken about some, this being a bit of an odd start to the season and how things are going. And you've spoken about some of the key premium players. But I mean, if you had to give, let's say, top 3 players that you'd kind of want to hold on to for the season, and sure, it may not be every single game, but majority of the season, what would be your recommendation based on what you've seen of the past, 5 game weeks?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I've gone for a bit of a variety in budget. So we'll start, the premium one is Salah for me. He's so consistent. Even when they lose 7-2, he scores twice. Yeah. It's things like that. And the goal he scored, I think, at the weekend, it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's the type of player, and the goals he scored against Leeds, that Liverpool can have a bad game and Salah can still get 10 points. He's just so consistent and he will be one of the top scoring players this season. So yeah, I don't see myself going without Salah unless he gets injured this season.
Yeah, he can really hit the ball, can't he, that lad? He's phenomenal, really is.
Yeah, the goal at the weekend, just absolutely out of nowhere. You think you're on for a blank when you've got him, and then something like that comes and he reminds you why you've got him in your team. So
it's like Roman Saiss eat your heart out, because that one counted.
Yeah, sadly I had Saiss, and
sorry to remind you of that, man. Carry on. Sorry.
I had a good enough game week without it. In terms of the middle budget one is someone that is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think this Everton team look so strong. And I think it's not just form. I think it's going to stay the way they've strengthened in midfield. I think the likes of Allen and Decore have actually changed that team as much as someone like Rodriguez has. So their midfield, and if they all stay fit, they will continue to compete. And he is playing in exactly where you want him to be. He doesn't move from about the 6-yard box most of the time. He's just there to put the ball in the back of